i.e. Kamala Harris, or do we want to go pro-Hamas protest in Washington, D.C.? I almost want to make it a
Well, she was
story.
never really the border czar. She wasn't really given that job. So.
Yeah, so she wasn't actually the border czar.
Maybe pro-BLM, pro-Hamas.
Yeah, so she, you know what? You're right, Belle. I should make sure that I use my words carefully and clearly, because the mainstream media is now making sure that we understand that she is not, nor has she ever been, the border czar.
She was put in charge of the border.
Nope.
She was in charge of reaching out to the South and Central American countries to stem the immigration.
She wasn't the border czar.
She was not actually the border czar.
She is not the border czar.
She was never border czar.
She was not the border czar.
Let's be very clear. There was no border czar.
President Biden put his vice president, Kamala Harris, in charge of one of his administration's growing challenges. She is now the point person on immigration.
Vice President Harris is now the Biden administration's point person
to oversee his administration's efforts to stem the flow of migrants.
Kamala Harris, the point person on immigration.
The point person in the effort to stop the flow of migrants.
Kamala Harris will lead the response to the border challenge.
Kamala Harris to lead the White House efforts to tackle migration challenges at the U.S.-Mexico border.
To take the lead on overseeing all of these efforts at the border.
Putting his vice president, Kamala Harris, in charge of this.
Her first big portfolio item
To oversee solutions.
I have confidence that she's going to do a good job in this role. I think President Biden made a good decision, a wise move.
Now, see, the political left, the first little portion of that, and I'll replay it for you. I should have explained it a little bit better. The first little portion of that is the media today, saying she was never over the border. She was never a part of the border. She was never the border czar. And they're really, really hanging up on this terminology, the border czar. They are very hung up on the nomenclature, border czar. Now, I have a list of czars being put over particular projects from a political perspective. The term goes back to FDR. Better get on top of this on Wikipedia before they erase it. Because they've already removed Kamala Harris from that list. If she was ever a part of the list, I don't know, but she's not there now. I don't know that Joe Biden ever used the term czar himself, but he most certainly put her in charge of the southern border. But you're not allowed to say that anymore.
She was put in charge of the border.
Nope.
She was in charge of reaching out to the South and Central American countries to stem the immigration.
She wasn't the border czar.
She was not actually the border czar.
She is not the border czar.
She was never border czar.
She was not the border czar.
Let's be very clear. There was no border czar.
Kamala Harris was put in charge of the southern border. And the mainstream media is gaslighting you to the point that it is as an insult to the American people. When will Kamala Harris sit down for her first interview? When will Kamala Harris answer some of the questions regarding her ascension to the presumptive nomination for her party? When will Kamala Harris answer her failures on the southern border? What did she do and when did she do it? What did she know and when did she know it? What was her role? Joe Biden said she was in charge. Everybody in the mainstream media in March of 2021 said she was in charge. Nothing infuriates me more on behalf of you, the listening audience and the American people, than to be treated this stupid. They think you are so dumb that they can regurgitate lies to the point that you'll believe them.
You saw the tweets from Axios contradicting themselves, correct?
Yes. Axios referred to her as in charge of the border, and they actually used the term border czar. Then they said, nobody's ever used that term. Nobody's ever called her that. And then they went so far as to correct themselves.
That's what I was going to say. They actually made a correction on their correction.
But they don't correct the new information. So listen to this now. This is very important.
This is the editor's.
They corrected from 3 years ago.
This is the editor's note. This article has been updated and clarified to note that Axios was among the news outlets that incorrectly labeled Harris border czar back in 2021.
All right, so they put her in charge of the border, and many of us in mainstream media use terminology that has been used regarding individuals that are put in charge of these types of things since FDR. And now they are correcting themselves because it is inconvenient for them now that they use the terminology then. I want to go over the list of U.S. executive branch czars. In the United States, the informal political term czar is employed in media and popular usage to refer to high-level officials who oversee a particular policy. There have never been any U.S. government offices with the title czar, but various government officials have sometimes been referred to by the nickname czar rather than their actual title. The earliest known use of the term for a U.S. government official was in the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945, during which 11 unique positions, or 12 if you count the economic czar, were so described. The term was revived mostly by the press to describe officials in the Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford administration, and continues today. The list is somewhat subjective, but you can go over the number of individuals from Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, who had the number of titles of czar behind them. This is not new. And the mainstream media knows exactly what the hell they're doing. They're gaslighting the American people. But we have receipts, folks.
President Biden put his vice president, Kamala Harris, in charge of one of his administration's
March
growing
2021.
challenges. She is now the point person on immigration.
Vice President Harris is now the Biden administration's point person
to oversee his administration's efforts to stem the flow of migrants.
Kamala Harris, the point person on immigration.
The point person and the effort to stop the flow of migrants.
Kamala Harris will lead the response to the border challenge.
Kamala Harris to lead the White House efforts to tackle migration challenges at the U.S.-Mexico border.
To take the lead on overseeing all...
Yeah, and on it goes. But just listen to this from CNN yesterday.
She was put in charge of the border.
Nope.
She was put in charge of the border. This is I forget the guy's name. He's from the Washington Free Beacon. She was put in charge of the border. Nope. Yes, she was. We were all there. We all saw it.
You misheard.
It's so infuriating what the mainstream media is doing. Dan is in Franklin with a thought on all of this. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Matt, always great to talk to you. My last few days being able to talk to you every other day, got a new job, so excited about that. But wanted to make 3 points. Number one, the reason why the Democrats gaslight the entire country, people in Tennessee, and all of the wonderful 99.7 listeners is because they've been doing it to their constituents, the people that rely on them for decades, all the way back to like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. That is the way they operate, and it's worked for them. The second thing is I really want you to find, this is unbelievable audio. I was watching last night ABC News Tonight. You can find it. I actually sent it in on the text line. Amy Klobuchar, for the listeners, Minnesota senator, ran for president, I think in 2020. She was asked by this top anchor with ABC News Tonight about Kamala. She was talking about Biden, and then she said, "What were your impressions? What did you think of Kamala Harris when you were a senator with her?" The first thing she said was, "She stands up straight. She arches her back. She has her head up." That was the first thing. The second thing she said was, she starts a mission, she starts something, and she completes it, which was laughable. And the last thing I wanted to say about Kamala is that she doesn't refer to anything that she's done recently, because she hasn't done anything recently. And she will go back at least half of her speeches or every single speech when she was a prosecutor. She doesn't talk about anything she did as vice president or anything as a senator because she doesn't have anything. It's amazing.
It's infuriating that the media is already engaged in the cover-up. But I also would suggest, Dan, and thank you for the call and thank you for the information on the super text line. I'll check it out. That these folks are already on their heels. They are already engaged in an activity by which they are attempting to convince us what we know empirically to be true is not. Empirical truth, what does that mean? That means it is observable. That means that you saw it or you heard it, that you know it to be factual. You don't have to put pen to paper and figure it out because you witnessed it, you experienced it, or you can experience it. It is an empirical truth that it has rained over the last 24 hours in the Middle Tennessee area. It's an empirical truth that, Jay Harper at 1:30 today, absent some, physical ailment or illness, will deliver the news thereabouts. It's an empirical truth that I'm talking to you right now from the studios of Supertalk 99.7 WTN. And it is an empirical truth that Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border. At the time, we joked about it. Well, we didn't because I wasn't here at the time. But I'm certain that y'all did. I know I did in Birmingham. We laughed about it in Birmingham. I remember. We're like, Joe Biden can't fix the border, so he's throwing. I remember saying he's throwing his vice president under the bus and giving her an unfixable situation that he created through his executive orders, and now he's screwing her over. Ha, ha, ha. I bet Kamala hates this. Ha, ha, ha. Y'all remember that?
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true.
And now we pretend that it never happened. Or at least they pretend that it never happened. On the issue of immigration and border control, the Vice President of the United States, actually, I got this wrong. On the Wikipedia page, it is still listed on the Wikipedia page. She is listed as the border czar. By the way, Donald Trump had one. It was Tom Homan. We've spoken to Tom multiple occasions on our show. Kamala Harris became the border czar in 2021. The president appointed her to that position. That's still up, at least as far as Wikipedia is concerned. Barack Obama, Alan Burson was his go-to guy on the border. Called him the border czar. Hold on, I have to sneeze. Stand by. Pardon me. Thank you. Certainly. Now, what we will do when we return, in addition to your telephone calls, I want to juxtapose what the mainstream media is doing with this information. She was never the border. Matt, she was never the border czar. What are you talking about? She was never in charge of the border. To what they're doing with the Trump assassination attempt. Newsweek just came out with an article saying that, we don't think he was ever hit with a bullet. First and foremost, what the hell does that matter? Secondly, you see what they're doing here? They're trying to change the narrative. They don't care that Donald Trump almost got his head blown off. They spent about 24 hours pretending that they did. And now they're not pretending anymore. They don't care that he almost got his head blown off. What they care about is that this looks good for him in the manner in which he reacted to it. It has caused normal Americans to take a pause with regard to their feelings about Trump. It has stopped the dehumanization of Donald Trump in its tracks, and they hate it. And they have to stop it. They have to blanch it at every opportunity, and they're doing so right now through Newsweek and other media organizations. We'll talk about that next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.